Okay, let's just make a really cool looking sphere or set of spheres. So the first thing, we want to switch to cycles render because that's going to be the highest quality render. And if you can, if you have a GPU, which is a graphics card, so like I'm on a Windows computer, but if not, CPU is going to be okay. But I'm going to switch to GPU, which means really fast rendering. Let's do Shift A and add a plane because it's nice to have a ground if you want to make a nice render because it's nice that it casts shadow. Your object will cast shadows on the ground. Let's delete this cube. So select the cube, hit X, and choose delete. We'll add a sphere. Shift A, go to Mesh, UV Sphere. Let's move it up. GZ, and right click on it and do Shade Smooth. Let's give it a material. So in this tabs over here, the material tab, new, and let's start with a red, make it a red ball. And so we can't see anything yet because we're in our solid shading, but if we go to our kind of preview rendering, we'll see what it looks like. And so the next thing is we want nice ambient light, so like a nice sky, and by default, you can only choose colors. It's a gray color, but if you wanted it kind of a sky color, make it a little desaturated blue and brighten it a bit. Let's go to rendered and see how it's looking. So now we have light coming from this point light, and we have kind of this blue ambient light, and already I think it's looking pretty cool. Okay, but if you select your point light, you have kind of new options over here, and instead of materials, there's a light bulb. So instead of it being a point, I want it to act more like a sun light. So if I click sun, it's going to just blow out the whole image because by default it was set to point. It made sense for the power to be 1,000 watts, but a sun, we don't want it to be 1,000 watts. We want it to be like 1 or maybe 4. So that's kind of like a bright sun. So we have, let's say, oh, that's a nice looking red ball. So I'm just going to duplicate this by holding Shift D, or I'm going to hold Shift and hit D. And now if I move my mouse around, there's another ball. But if I hit X, it constrains it to the X, and I'm going to left click to confirm. Also notice if I click my sun lamp, if I hit R and Z and rotate around the Z axis, we start getting, different lighting effects. So let's choose our second sphere. And if I go into materials, it has this red material. And if I try to change it, it's going to change it to both because they actually both share the same material. See? So let's make it red. And I'll even label it red. But I don't want this to be red, so I'm going to hit the number 2 because right now this material is being shared by 2 objects. So I'm going to click that and make it a single user now. So now it's its own. This object has a red material. This has red.001. But let's label this like metal. And instead of being red, I'm going to make this white and turn it all the way metallic. And that's looking awesome. Its roughness. Roughness has a big impact on how reflective it is. So if it's super rough, think about like really rough metal, it's not going to reflect. But if I turn this almost down, I like a little roughness. If you turn it to 0, it's like perfectly reflective. So I'm going to do like 0.2. That's cool. Let's duplicate. So Shift D, hit X while I'm in duplicate mode to constrain it. And then let's make this one a new material. So I'm going to hit that 2 and call this glass. And instead of being the principled, this is the surface is a principled shader, I'm going to just click this and say glass. And so now we have a glass material. I think by default the index of refraction or IOR of glass is 1.45, so you don't need to change that, but I might change the roughness to make it less rough. And now we have like different materials. It's kind of, I might move this GX over here because it's kind of cool to see other objects through it. So we're looking pretty good. Let's make one more. So I just duplicated it with Shift D. You don't have to do this, but let's make this just a regular white. It's plastic, so it's not metallic at all. And let's just make this fully, let's turn the roughness down a lot. Okay. To go into your camera view, you might have controls up here where you can just click the camera view. I'm going to hit 0, or you can do view, there. And then let's open up this little tab, go to view, lock camera to view. I'm going to hit N to close the tab, or you can just drag it closed. So with that locked camera, I can orbit around. The last thing I'm going to do is, instead of this boring blue ambient light, let's go to this world tab. I'm going to choose, in color, I'm going to click here, this little dot, because these are where things can get input. I'm going to click that and say environment texture. And this is a really specific kind of picture it's looking for, called an equirectangular. It's like a stretched image. So I'll send that as an attachment. So find where you saved that picture. You probably won't be able to see the picture. It's called Rooftop Day, and it's an HDR file. Most computers can't just look at it by default, but when you're in Blender and we chose environment texture, I can hit open. I'm going to navigate to where I saved it, and on mine it's in the downloads folder. If you want to go to like your desktop or home, but it's in my downloads, and it's this Rooftop Day. Hit that, and now I have these really cool, basically it's just really cool ambient lighting. And if I wanted to, I don't really even need the sun anymore, because there's already this picture already has a sun in it. So I could just delete this sun. Let's see what happens if I delete it. Delete that sun, and it still looks pretty awesome. I'm going to just do a render real quick by going up here, render image. I'll pause the computer briefly. So this is a pretty realistic looking render. So there's a few little problems that can easily be fixed. Notice how these spheres aren't perfectly sphere. You can kind of see they look like a little jaggedy. And that's just because they're actually pretty low. There's kind of low polygons there. If you go to solid mode, and if I go into edit mode, there really aren't that many polygons. But what you can do is add a modifier. So this wrench, say Subdivision Surface, and it actually smooths that out. Also, there's kind of an artifact right here with shading, and that also is fixed if you just add Subdivision Surface. So yeah.